Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to day 31 of 100 Days of Code with me, Lilly Code. So far we've been going through and doing a React tutorial. That's what the bare bones of this 100 days so far has been. We're actually flying along. So the last 2 days, day 29 and day 30, we started to make a meal ordering app, and I'm actually loving that. Just because I'm seeing the progress so quick, so that's a bit of a cop out, because these things do take time, and don't be hard on yourself if you don't make loads of progress in the first few days of doing a course, because each instructor is going to teach differently. This is the fourth little project we've actually done within this course, so I'm finally getting to grips with it, and I have 4 years experience, so I have that behind me as well. So if you start a course and it's not going as smoothly, please don't compare yourself to me. We're all on our own journey, and once you're practicing, you're doing okay. You're doing fabulous. You're doing everything you need to do, in fact. But with that said, anyway, I'm going to take a break from the React app for a moment, because I need to do some asynchronous programming later on, and I was just getting a bit stuck with it yesterday. So I realized I had a dot then in the asynchronous programming, which then I didn't actually need that, that comes with the promises. So I decided to spend this hour on getting up to scratch, doing a bit of research into asynchronous programming, so when I come to do it later on, I amn't as stuck, I just get on better with it. So that's what I've done. And first of all, I'm going to read the documentation, the MDM web docs, because this is just always so helpful. And then I've also found a course on O'Reilly. Probably should have found a free access course, but anyway, I found a course on O'Reilly. This is what I'm doing. Found a course on O'Reilly, and the teacher is K.S. Horstman, and I just love his introduction already. He seems like quite a bit of a funny guy. He's a guy who's clearly been in the industry for a long time. You get that from the way he's communicating. He came from a Java background, I think, and just from the small bit I've picked up, and he's just really funny. So the title of the course is Modern JavaScript for the Impatient. It's only 8 hours long. I do want to do the whole thing, but today I want to focus on Async Await, because I'm going to need to use that later on. So we'll have a read of the official documentation first of all, that come from Mozilla, which is these are the people who wrote JavaScript, or are tightly coupled with JavaScript. I think these are the people who created JavaScript, who are Mozilla. So Mozilla Free Software supports Mozilla products. Cool. Nice. They're the people that made Firefox. I love Firefox. I've been using Brave, but I really do love Firefox as well. Although, to be honest, I prefer the developer tools in Brave. Sorry, Mozilla. Take a look. Google, I could never get away from Google's developer tools. There just wasn't a better tool for me. I was so used to them. And which is this, and you use that all the time in programming. You need to use this. This is part of your browser that you're using constantly. And you just use Ctrl Shift and I to pull this up, because I want to make sure that these videos speak to every level. Probably not going to be as interesting for someone with way more experience than me. They'd be like, come on, I know this stuff. But it's for the people that, when I was starting and I couldn't get these answers, and people were just flying ahead in their tutorials, and I hadn't got a notion what was going on. So, and it just took scraping around at the bottom of the barrel to figure it out by myself. So, that is cool actually. So what have they got to do with Firefox then? I mean, JavaScript, because they have all the documentations on it. Okay, so they want their own games, non-free games. Okay, but the games must be made with free technology. Very cool. I love all these little initiatives. Help the guy who made the language free for everybody. That's brilliant. I should know who already made JavaScript. When I look it up, I will know. The name will definitely ring a bell. Mozilla maintains comprehensive developer documentation called the MDM Web Docs, which contains information about web technologies. Of course, it has information on HTML, CSS, other languages as well, although up for debate, HTML isn't a language, it's a markup language, not a programming language. That comes under fire. I don't care, so if anybody is wondering, like, if that's my actual opinion, I just thought that was the way, but like, I don't want to get into that argument. I'm a lover, not a fighter, so, and that can cause some fights. So JavaScript, as well as Mozilla specific information, publishes a large number of videos about web technologies and the development of Mozilla projects on the Air Mozilla website. So it's just a highly regarded company that made Firefox, that are encouraging people who have made their own technology, so open source software, to be used, like Firefox. You know, that's free, and they have supported languages that do the same, and they also have just great documentation. So they are a development company, so they have the credentials, and this particular website is very useful, and I refer to it a lot. I thought this was like the official docs. Is Mozilla the official documentation for JavaScript? Okay, JavaScript is officially maintained by Mozilla, so only documentation by Mozilla is official. So it actually is the official documentation as well, so that's fantastic. Now we know the answer to those questions. Did a bit of rejigging on my phone yesterday that's recording this, so we should have more space and not have pop-ups and things like that. I've set up a completely separate phone now, because, you know, that's just the way I should be doing this, rather than using my actual phone and having to come and set it up. So I've downgraded my phone to just a crappy phone, and I'm using my decent phone for this purposes. So we were late getting started today because I hadn't fully properly set it up, even though I thought I had. But when I sat down to record, different things weren't available to allow this little person down here. So anyway, Lilly Code. So anyway, we'll just continue. So, making asynchronous programming easier with Async and Await. Cool. So these are recent additions, is the async functions, because before this was all done with promises, and the difference with a promise, we'll read all about it now, but my understanding is the difference with a promise is going off to get some piece of information. You're making a request, or you're trying to do something that it needs to go off and get that information, you know. It takes time to go away and get it and grab it and bring it back. So with a promise, you couldn't continue on until you had that piece of information back, basically. You had to say, like, do this piece of information, then do this, and if there's an error, do this. So you sort of had to wait for it. Whereas with async functions, you just tell it what to do, and then you can continue on as if you have received that piece of information back. You can use the response directly. You can just say, res, do this with it. So that's the difference. Promises were more long-winded visually as well. You're just looking at it. Anyway, we're going to figure it out now here together. So I need to really get my head around this. You know, this is very important for JavaScript programmers, and I still haven't. I've spent time here and there. Anyway, enough waffle, let's get into it. So, more recent additions are the async functions and the await keywords. Okay. Added in ECMAScript 2017, which is the most recent update of JavaScript. These features basically act as syntactic sugar, love that word, words on top of promises, making asynchronous code easier to write and to read afterwards. Yeah, that part is true anyway. They make async code look more like old school synchronous code, so they're well worth learning. This article gives you what you need to know. Basic computer literacy. See guys, like, you just get stuck in and learn this. You really don't need, look, it's on the official documents, just a bit of understanding of JavaScript, basic computer literacy. I wouldn't even worry about this last one because that's what we're here to learn. So, objective. My point is that this skill can be learned by absolutely anybody, and with practice makes perfect. You do not need to have a bigger brain because we actually all have the same size brain. So that's just, don't be afraid. Get stuck in and learn it, and it just takes time. I was running around in circles for a long time myself with this stuff. So at least a year. Feeling very lost, but it just starts to come together. Objective. To understand the use of Async Await. That would be great. Okay. So the basics. There are two parts. The async keyword. First of all, we have the async keyword, which you put in front of a function. Okay, so that is big enough. Let's just go bigger, because why not? So first of all, we have the async keyword, which you put in front of a function declaration. Yes. So when you're declaring your normal function, you just stick the word async in front of it, and that tells it that this is going to be an async function. Cool. To turn it into an async function. An async function is a function that knows how to expect the possibility of the await keyword being used to invoke asynchronous code. Yes, exactly. So yeah, when you put this here, then you can use await, and actually when you put async in front of a function, it expects await. I think you get errors if you just have async. I think so. I'm pretty sure. And then you don't add in the await, so you do need both of them, and this is just telling it this is going to be asynchronous. So it's possibly needs to go and get something that we could have a wait time to get back. Try typing the following lines into your browser's console. Alright. So, I always find it so funny when quite professional websites that are explaining code have errors. But then again, look, you can't get around it, can you? You realise that also when you start coding, that sometimes you just have errors. So function, if it compiles, now you should try and do unit testing and different tests, which I'm only really learning now as well. So, great guys, great. You get there eventually. Don't be worrying about any of this stuff if you're new to it. It comes with time. Just get the basics down. Keep practicing. Check out Free Code Camp. Absolutely fabulous resource to learn JavaScript, HTML and CSS. Really good. Loads of free resources out there where you can interactively code, and you'll be sort of brought along the way until you're ready to start doing Udemy courses and different things like that. Then you can start making projects and trying to get a little portfolio together for yourselves. Mine was terrible when I got my first job, so don't stress about it. Just keep learning, At the time I was stressing my bean off, but looking back I realised there was no need to stress. You get there in the end. So please do take these words of advice. Function hello, return hello, undefined. Okay, that's fine, because now if I call hello, it should tell me hello, hello. Like, it literally told me what to do, and I'm excited. But there you go. So the function returns hello. Nothing special, right? I found it special. Okay, but what if we turn into an async function? So let's try this. I love the way we're practicing. Async function. I'll also just increase this actually. Cool. So you can see everything. Async function hello. So this one is going to be asynchronous, which means this is also, you don't need await for sure. Like, you don't have to have it or else it gets an error, because we've just got async here. So that was good to confirm. Hello, and then we will do this undefined, and then if we do hello, I'm guessing, yeah, oh, so now it's a promise, and it was fulfilled, it got back, so it, yeah, Ah, ah, indeed. Invoking the function now returns a promise. This is one of the traits of async function. Their return values are guaranteed to be converted to promises. Cool. Okay, so you're actually, yeah, you're converting this thing to a promise. That's interesting. Okay. You can also create an async function like so. Yes, you can assign it to a variable or a constant. In this case, it's a variable. Yeah, it is a variable, or a constant just remains the so this, we're letting this be something, so this means we could overwrite this value basically, whereas with a constant you can't overwrite it within the same code execution. So let hello, so now all of this will be assigned to this keyword hello, or variable hello function. So async function, we just open up our parentheses and then we'll open up our object brackets and say return and aloha. Let's do aloha for a change, and then we will close this off. Hello has already been defined. Okay, so yes, so we already have. Do you ever write a word so often that then you're just like, is that how you spell that? Like, is it? Yeah. Once you start writing a word so much, my brain just sort of freezes on me. So if I clear the console, we should be able to do that again, because basically it just had storage of something called hello already, so it couldn't reassign it, and that's what was going on. So if we try that again, async function and function, open up our parentheses, close our parentheses, come on, yeah, and then open up our curly brackets and return, come on, aloha, and enter. So just clearing the console doesn't work. Just doing a hard refresh and emptying the cache work of interest, or is something up there? Why can't I? Oh. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, I just needed to do a hard refresh, clear the cache. So if you just click on this button and keep your finger on it, you can come down to empty cache and hard reload, or you can see there CTRL, Shift and or will do a hard reload of the page as well. So I just like to hold this down and do empty cache and hard reload for like sanity's sake. So now if you can also create an async function expression like so, and then if I just now call hello with the two parentheses, okay, so there we go. Yeah, so see these little things that, like, until you actually dive into something and start practicing it, for me anyway, like, I've looked at these and I knew that this was what was going on, but like, until it clicks, it just doesn't click. And then once it clicks, it's clicked, you know? So keep that in mind. If you're struggling with stuff, just keep at it, because eventually it will click. I've looked at these loads of times. Like, I should really know this. Like, I feel like I should know this already, but, you know, I'm not going to get down on myself and go against my own advice. I'm learning. We're learning together. And that's all that's important, you know? But, like, because this was just a name, hello, when I was typing this out, I was like, well, how can I just call a function on this variable? Like, that's just hello. So it just sort of messed with my brain for a moment, but hello is an asynchronous function and we've called it hello. So of course we can do that, you know, but it just, I feel like, I don't know if that was really solidified in my brain or if it's just the morning. I'm not sure. But yeah, because I had just had this called a variable, and then I was adding the curly brackets. I was like, But of course, because this is equal to an asynchronous function, so we can call it because it is a function. So great, okay. So, and you can use arrow function. So these are also new ES6 syntax, which is just a quicker way of writing this whole thing. So as we can see here, so it's not going to let me define hello again. So I'll say let yo equal async and open and close parentheses, and then we do an arrow function, which is just a more shorthand way of doing the exact same thing we've already been doing. And then and then we open up our parentheses, and I'll just say yo, another greeting depending on where you're from. Yo. So we will, so that's undefined, and then if I just call yo, there we go. So you know, we can also use it with arrow functions with the shorthand, because that's just another function. This is something else that's in ES6. I've got used to these now because React declares all of its component functions like this, and yeah, it's given me a better understanding of them. You just need to practice these things. They all do basically the same thing. There you go. To actually consume the value returned when the promise fulfills, yes. Since it's returning a promise, we could use a .then block, okay, or even just shorthand as okay. So let's try that. So we will, yeah, so yo is also an asynchronous arrow function. It's a shorthand version of the function. So let's try and do this ourselves with yo. So I'll just say yo, open up my brackets, .then, because you can chain on things with a promise. So you have your promise, and then you say then, once we get the promise back, what's the next thing to do? So because this is a promise, it's converted it to a promise, we can use that .then, and let's just console log it out for the moment. Console log, and this should be still the promise. Okay, yes, cool, great. Boop, boop, boop. So we will continue. So then I'm going to just do this, and I think all this is going to do is, rather than say promise here, it will say value, because we've just given that thing a name in this particular line, and the name we've given it is the name value. So now if I do hello, oh yo, let's stick with yo. Yeah, yo, open and close our brackets, then .then, and then we pass in the name we want to give this thing, and then we have our arrow function, which is saying with this then give it the name value. So then what we want to do after we get this promise, we have our value, we've given this thing the name of value, and what we want to do is console log out that value. So it should just change the name of the thing, of the promise, excuse me, of the thing. So so we put in one too many brackets, we have our promise. Okay, so yeah, because value is just a promise. So now if I go, I can't go just console log promise or console log value, I don't think, because we don't have it in this particular block. Yeah, no, I had to run the function to get the promise, to then do something with the value. So if I just console log out value, this will not work. But let's make sure. Cool, yeah, value is not defined, because we're only getting value from running this function, then calling it value, and what we've named as value, the thing we're getting back, is just the promise. So that's what we get. Undefined. So why is it undefined there? And then here we have you. Hopefully we will see. So the async keyword is added to functions to tell them to return a promise rather than directly returning the value. Yes, got that. Okay, super. The await, how long is this? Like, this is going to take us the whole hour with all of my meanderings, but I know we're doing all right. And look, I'm still learning, and slow and steady wins the race, guys. Sometimes I just fly through this, and that's why, you don't learn anything in the end, 'cause I'm like, oh yeah, got it, makes sense, and then just move on. But really, if we pick it apart, so like we saw in the last article, okay, so the async keyword is added to functions to tell them to return a promise rather than returning the direct value. Yes. Await keyword. The advantage of an async function only becomes apparent when you combine it with await. Await only works inside async functions within regular JavaScript code. However, it can be used on its own with JavaScript modules. Okay. Don't know what that's about. JavaScript programs are pretty small. Okay. So let's not worry about this for the moment. Oh, just like literally a module. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't want to get into this right now. This is something else we should definitely look at. Let's stick with the promises. That's what we're doing. So you can either use async await with promises, or you can use them with modules independently. But the await keyword in the approach of promises, which is what we're focusing on, it can only be used inside an asynchronous function. So okay. Await can be put in front of any await can be put in front of any async promise-based function to pause your code on the line that fulfills the promise, then return the resulting value. You can use await when calling any function that returns a promise, including web API functions. Yep. Here's a trivial example. Super. Love the triviality. It's a good place to start. We're wrapping our head around this. So, if I just go back here to this. So here we have an asynchronous function called hello, right? I'll just change the name of this to hello2, just to make sure I don't get that error saying, oh, you have a function hello. Okay, so that's equal to an async function. Cool. And then in here, well, inside of our parentheses, our curly brackets, rather than just returning, we want to add await, right? And this is just going to wait until we get the promise back, and then we're going to say promise dot resolve, and then we tell it what to do once the promise has resolved. So then we will just assign hello to hello. So cool. And then undefined, so then I can do hello, call the function dot then, and alert, and this should then take that text and alert it. I mean, come on, I'm literally just following the documentation, but take happiness in your small achievements, all of them. So hello dot then alert. Cool. So I thought the promise should be fulfilled. Yes, okay, cool, perfect. Great. Of course, the above example is not very useful, although it does serve to illustrate the syntax. Let's move on and look at real example. Okay, let's look back at the simple fetch example that we saw in the previous article. Rewriting promise code with async await. Cool. So this is to fetch data. So we want to fetch this image. So we've passed in the image name in a string, and we want to fetch that data, which is like fetches a, it's one of these API requests that they were talking about. You can fetch, get, push, delete, and these are associated with the API, so it goes out and does that call and comes back, sort of part of the reason why these are so useful to begin with. So we're fetching coffee.jpg, and then with the response, if the response is not okay, we want to throw an error, and the error we want to throw is to say print out this string, and this is backticks, so this is going to print out all of this as a string, but allow us to use the $sign and actually convert our response.status to text. That's doing that on the fly. So we want to throw a new error, and the string that's going to be printed out is HTTP error status, and then give us the status. So the response.status, which will be like 401 or 202, or well, 202 wouldn't be it, so 401 or 504 or 500, or you know, the error status that we have got back from the server on not being able to successfully get this particular thing that we're trying to get, the coffee.jpg. And then, so once, if the response is not okay, that's what we're going to do. And then otherwise, because that's just one if block that's going to catch that, and then, so if it's not okay, we come into this if block. And then in all other instances, we just return response.blob. Blob came out weird the first time, and then it just was weird for me. So return response.blob. Yes, so we're just going to return back the information that we've got from the server from trying to request this HTTP request. And then we have another then. Oh, so this is if. Oh, so then catch the response, do something, and obviously the first thing you want to do is check if it's not okay, because then you can just throw the error and that's good, you know, you've handled that situation. Then we can chain on another then and say, if I have my blob, so you're going to return the response of your blob, okay, then we have my blob. So the response, so now we're calling the response my blob. And we're going to perform some more functionality on this, or operations. So we want to let object.url equal to the URL dot create object URL my blob. So I don't know where this is coming from. This could either be an inbuilt function. I think this is an inbuilt function for the URL, like keyword, which is also just like a keyword you can use. So which has its own associated properties, you know, this isn't a function that they wrote. So we've defined, this is our own definition. So we've defined this variable called object URL, and then yeah, URL is just inbuilt. So this is also an inbuilt method. So you can call URL dot create object URL and pass it my blob. So from the response coming back from the server, it's going to create an object URL for us. And then we also want to let image, so we've just defined another variable here, and with the document we want to create the element, which again this is built in, and pass it the string image. Okay. Okay, so we've created a variable called image, and we actually want to create an image element for the page, so that when we use this image, that's actually going to be a whole image tag from what I can gather, right? So then the image source, yes, of course. So then you can tell this image tag is like an actual image block that goes into the DOM. So have we got an image here? We should do. Okay. So if I hover on this image, so that's an SVG, I should have known. So it's a link. So these are good for perhaps an example. Show me an image. So an image tag is just like IMG, you know. This is also going to be, yeah, cool. So an image tag, excuse me, is just IMG. So rather than having A, it's IMG here. And one of the properties on an image tag is the source. You pass it the source, and it can be a self-closing tag as well, like a link. So you can just do a slash and then close it off, self-closing. but it would be img and src. So I'll just actually edit this and show you, or add a new edit as HTML. Okay, so this is our a tag. So that's our a tag. Let me just open this up so it's a bit. So here we have a list, we have an a tag, then our a tag has a span within it. So here's our span within our a tag. Here's our closing a tag. This is a list item. So within this same list item, we could have another block, and this could be an image. So this will be img, and then an image has a source. So you must give it a source. Where is it getting this image from? And this could be, in this case, we have, you know, my image, or whatever the name of the image was, .jpg. And then if you self-close that, that image will display on the page. And you can also add other things into the image, like you can give it a width and a height. So there's different properties available. You can search them when you're looking to use an image, you know, but you could have a width and a height, for example. So, oh no. Okay, so we will copy that. You get the picture anyway. So basically an image is just another tag. By doing what we've done over here, we've actually created this DOM element, because we did document.createElement, which is accessing this actual page document, the DOM. So if we go back up here, where did we go? Who knows? If we go back up here, here we go. So we have created a variable called image, which is just holding this whole image tag from our document. So we've created an image element, which is this thing, and an image element automatically contains this source to know where the image is coming from. So what we've done is we've said image.source. So it's basically an object, and we're accessing the source property on that object, and we're giving it the URL from the blob, from the response from the server, which we've also used this to create a URL, which is going to give us an actual URL, and then we have to call that object URL. So we equal that to the image source, and therefore now the image has an actual URL where to get this image from. So it will be http you know, www dot blah blah blah, you know, myimage.com, something like that. And then so then document.body. So then we're going to append the child of image. So we're actually going to insert that into the DOM now. So now we have created and inserted an image into the DOM, all from a promise and the fetch. So we fetch the image, and then we are actually turning this into a URL and inserting it into the DOM. So that's what's going on there. So cool. That's great. I've actually learned something. So you have your first dot then, and your first dot then is going to handle your error response, because you should do that first. That makes sense. If something is wrong, let's deal with that now, rather than if something is right, going and doing all of the calculations and then finding out. Well, you wouldn't, because you didn't have an error. It didn't have a response, so it would throw an error unless you handle that properly. So you put that first. If we don't have a response, do this. If we have a response, call it my blob instead, just for better naming convention, and do something with that blob. And what we want to do is create this document, add a node into the DOM, add something into the DOM, which is the image, and stick it in there. That's what we're going to do. Stick an image into the DOM, and then if we have an error, we have a catch statement, which is catching the error, and we've just called the error E. So we've just given this the name E. So then we can move ahead and just console log out E.message, which will be our error message, and console log out the string as well. There's been a problem with your fetch operation. So that's cool. That's great. Okay. So we'll move on. By now you should have a reasonable understanding of promises and how they work. I do. But let's convert this to use async await. Oh crap, that wasn't the thing I'm trying to learn. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's why that. Okay, right. So that was the promise. This is a promise-based approach to doing this. So now, of course, there isn't even any async or await keywords in there. And this looked familiar, but still I felt like I was learning. Okay, we'll continue. By now you should have a reasonable understanding of promises and how they work. So that's a promise. Yes, I do. But let's convert this to use async await and see how much simpler it makes things. Okay, cool. So now we have async function, and the function is called myFetch. Cool. So we open up our function definition here. Let the response equal await fetch coffee.jpg. So our response is going to just be fetching this coffee.jpg. And rather than using .then, because we don't need to hang around and wait for this thing to come back, we can just start doing things, which is the beauty of async await. So then we're just going to say, if we don't have a response, or if the response, so if we don't have a response, and the response should have this property OK on it, so we can access OK. So if we don't have response OK, throw the error. Then we just define what we want to do in the case that it's successful. Then we say let my blob equal await the response dot blob. And then we just do the same things that we wanted to do. So basically we can skip all of the thens, and we just say if it's not successful, do this, and then continue on as if it was successful and say okay. So just let my blob equal the awaited answer of response.blob, and go ahead and do the other things we wanted to do, which is create an image element of the DOM, a DOM image element, and then get the URL for the image, insert it into the image source, and then append this image tag into the document or into the DOM. So just add it to the page basically. So cool. And then in order to handle the errors, we just say myFetch, so the name of our function, .catch, so we want to catch the error, and we just have our standard function for catching an error. Yeah, no more then blocks everywhere, so you just get rid of them. Cool. It makes code much simpler and easier to understand. No more .then blocks everywhere. Since async keyword turns a function into a promise, you could refactor your code to use a hybrid approach of promises and await, bringing the second half of the function out into a new block to make it more flexible. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So you can try typing in the example yourself, or running our live example. See also the source code. Cool. So live examples are always great. Let's have a play with this. We've been reading for long enough. Time to put some fingers to the keyboard. I really wasn't expecting to see a cup of coffee at all. Oh my god, I love a cup of coffee. I have some here. Yum yum. So, I mean, I don't know what to do with this. Drink it. Let's just go back to our documentation and keep reading for a moment. So I'll close all of this stuff down. It's getting busy up there, and continue. So much for the entertaining Kay Horstman as well. We'll have to come back to him because he did look really good, and he clearly knows his stuff. Like, you know, he just looks like he knows his stuff. The way he talks about it, it's like, you know, you don't want to spend all day. He doesn't talk like this at all. That I don't know where that accent came from, but you know, you don't want to spend all day looking at this stuff. So let's just get into it. I'm not going to waste your time with classes. I'm not going to waste your time with with function declarations. I'm not going to waste your time with let and const. He's like, we're just going to get into this. If you're a, he said, if you're a, I don't know what he said. I won't continue that, but he seems funny actually. He seems quite funny, and just the way he's approached it, you know, that's what I want. Just tell me how this particular thing works. But I will come back to do that another day, and I think tomorrow, let's see how we get on tomorrow. Let's just focus on what we're doing today. So, since an async keyword turns into a promise, yeah, we could refactor it. So let's just have a look at this first. So this was our old code. Yeah, we had let the response equal await, and then you do the action that you are going to initially be doing as a promise. Okay, and then we just have if the wrong thing, do the right thing, and then catch the error, or do the thing we want to do. So here we have got async function and myFetch again. Let the response equal await, and the thing we want to go and get, that's going to be, you know, awaited on. So the promise, and that is fetching some data. If it's not okay, do this. Okay? And then, this is the syntax I see everywhere. So this is the syntax I see everywhere. So then it just says return await response.blob. So that makes sense now, way more. You know, God, you need to pick these things apart as well. I just expected that by continually looking at this, and I have studied it before, you know, but I sort of just thought, oh, when I keep on looking at it, this is going to make sense. Because that's how other things have made sense. But actually, doing some digging and figuring this out, I need to actually do some code practice with this, which I'll be doing later anyway, but more in-depth code practice. Like, just, you know, if you were a runner, you'd do laps. I need to do some laps. So, yes, so you have your thing that could go wrong. You catch your error. So first of all, you do the thing you want to do, await it. The thing that could take a moment, like go onto a server or something. Then you have catch it if that didn't work. If it didn't work, do this thing, throw an error. Then just return back the await. So the await is the response.blob. That's what we want to call it. Yeah. Let my blob equal, we were just awaiting the response.blob. Cool. Okay. Right. So now we have this to play with. So we can say myFetch, so we link back the same function because this is the function that's going to give us that returned thing. So we run that function because this is asynchronous. I don't know if this has been run yet until we actually do this. So then we're saying run the async function, then capture the blob, which is just this response.blob, and do the things we want to do in it, and then we can just catch straight away after it. Okay, cool. So that does make more sense. Okay. Simple fetch with async await. Any more examples? No. Okay. So simple fetch with async await. Call the fetch method to fetch the image and store it in a variable. Yes. So first we define an asynchronous function called myFetch. Then we let the response equal await of the fetch object. So call the fetch method to fetch the image and store it in a variable. The variable is called response. Cool. Use a then block to respond to the promise's successful completion. Yes. By taking the return response and returning blob on it to transform it to a blob. So this is just used in this particular example. Dot blob, or is it like just a standard thing? I think we only use dot blob with HTTP requests. Dot blob also returns a promise. When it successfully completes, it returns. You don't have to have a blob. I'm sure of that. You can call something else here. Well, this is giving the response the name of blob. And then in here, we've just passed in blob. So, yeah, so this could be named anything. This could be named Lily. And then in here, we would just pass it Lily, which is just the awaited response of this particular fetch. So the promise fulfilled. Once we've got the promise back, we can go ahead and do something. So then we just let it know, we're running this function above in order to get back this blob. So with that blob then, what we want to do, so it's just to protect. This is the bit that's just protecting if something goes wrong, you know, if we don't get it back, well then don't just seize up and stop running everything else on the page. Just throw an error. And if the case that we do get it, so once we run my fetch and it's successful, then get this thing, the whole reason we were trying to run this function in the beginning, which should be this coffee.jpg, the thing we're trying to fetch in this instance, but you could be doing something else here as well. But we've called that blob. So then with the blob, create an object URL that points to the blob. So then you do the things that you want to do. So yeah, what we've done is create an image element to display the blob. It is an image, so our blob is an image. Cool. Then let image equal document.create element image. So set the source of, oh yeah, so I'm one below. So first of all, create an object URL that points to the blob object. So here's our object URL and it points to the blob. So the blob is being passed in and we're creating this URL and we're assigning that to the object URL. Then create an image element to display the blob. It's an image. Blob. Blob is like a common name in like you'll see this a lot in programming, but like it's just funny, you know, blob. I don't know. So then let image equal. So now we are creating an image tag to display the blob and we've assigned that to the keyword of image. Cool. Set the source of the image to the object URL so the image displays it. Great. So then we have our image, which I've already sort of explained this, and then the source property on the image, we want to assign that to the URL that we created from the blob. Cool. And then stick it into the DOM. Yeah, so it actually displays on our page. So document.body.append child image. Cool. And then we want to just catch any errors that are coming out. So do you know what? That was actually a very productive hour for me. I hope you guys followed along as well and that was productive for you too, because I needed to actually talk through that and step through this documentation as slow as I did, because you know, I've already looked at promises and async and await, and I didn't just initially think, well, that's a promise, you know. I wasn't like, that's the old way. I was just like, oh yeah, great, we're learning, which we are learning. But then this was the updated version, and then we can make that even shorter. So this is async await, because obviously that wasn't doing it the async await way, because there wasn't even any async await keywords in there. But so, you know, I feel like I've sort of really drilled down on the differences. A promise has a dot then, so you're waiting to do something, you have a dot then, whereas async await, you remove all of that. And some important things to note are you equal your keyword to the await and you go and do some asynchronous code that you're going to have to wait for. Then first of all, you handle your error. So straight away, if something is wrong, you've sorted that out. Then you just go ahead and return the thing you're awaiting for. So you say return and await, use the await keyword and just give it a name. Then you can use that thing. So you call this function again in order to handle if something goes wrong, but you just go ahead and start doing things rather than having to chain on different dot thens. You just go ahead and do something, and then you can just have a catch error block at the end. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But you know what? I'm going to go on a little walk before I start work. I've got 20 minutes. So I'm actually going to go for a 5-minute walk around the block, because I feel like stiff today. What did I do? Like, you'd swear I did a workout or something. I've been lazy. Well, certainly haven't been lazy, but haven't been doing anything exerting shoulder pressure. So I need to go out and just, I did yoga yesterday. Still, that wasn't hard. I don't know. Who knows? My shoulders feel tight. I'm going to go out and suck up some fresh air into my lungs and just like go out and wake up and move a little bit, shake about the road. I quite like to do that. So, hi guys, just here shaking about. You know, gotta do it. So, cool. So you'll notice that we've wrapped the code inside a function and we've used the async keyword before the function keyword. So here, yeah. This is necessary. You have to create an async function to define a block of code in which you'll run your async code, yeah. And then you can only have an await if it's within this async. Do you know what, guys? Thanks. This is great. Inside the myFetch function definition, yes, you can see, let's close this so hopefully we get a bit more bandwidth. Inside the myFetch function definition, you can see that the code closely resembles the previous promise version, but there are some differences. Instead of needing to chain a .then block on the end of each promise-based method, you just need to add an await keyword before the method call. Yes. Right. Look what that blob method is and what that's doing. That seems to be confusing me a bit, but the penny will drop. Just keep on practicing. So, okay, inside the myFetch, yeah, so where were we? Yes, you just need to add an await keyword before the method call and then assign the result to a variable. Okay, so that's up here. Yeah, and we assign it to a variable. Okay, yeah. The await keyword causes the JavaScript runtime to pause on your code in this line, not allowing further code to execute in the meantime until the async function call has returned its result. Very useful if the subsequent code relies on that result. Awesome. Once that's completed, your code continues to execute starting on the next line. Cool. So if it didn't successfully return, we would just have our answer, you know, we would return and we would continue on with the rest of what we were trying to do in the page and not worry about this thing. Well, we might worry, but it would be fine. It wouldn't break anything. The response returned by the fulfilled fetch promise is assigned to the response variable when that response becomes available, and the parser pauses on this line until that occurs. Once a response is available, the parser moves to the next line, which creates a blob out of it. So it does just create a blob then. Okay, so blobs are linked to promises and it creates a blob. So blobs are, that's what a blob is. The blob object represents a blob, blobby blob, which is a file-like object of immutable raw data. Yeah, I just thought a blob was like data, you know, which is a file-like object of immutable raw data. Okay, so it's just the type that it returns this thing in. They can be read as text or binary. Very, very good. Or converted into a readable stream. So its methods can be used for processing the data. That's where this readable stream comes into it as well. Sometimes in promises, I think. Blobs can, or in Async Await, blobs can represent data that isn't necessarily in JavaScript native format. So you just get back your data and it doesn't matter because it's a blob, we can continue on. Oh, great. The file interface is based on blob. And I love this. Inherently blob. Inheriting. Blob. Inheriting blob functionality and expanding it to support files on the user's system. Great. Construct a blob from other non-blob objects and data. Use the blob constructor. Okay, so did we convert this to a blob, or was it a blob anyway? So do we need to use it or do we not? So here we have converted this to a blob. We could have just returned a response. Yes, so the blob function is not necessary. This blob function is inbuilt. It's returning it to a certain... It's giving it back to us in a certain configuration so that we can do certain things with it. So a blob is just like raw data. You can choose to convert it to a blob by doing blob bracket bracket, but you could have just returned response. Yes, just in this particular instance, a blob was better. And then you can call this whatever you want. So this could have just been called my response. It could have been called anything. So great. Okay. The penny has dropped. Wonderful. Absolutely great. Okay. So on that note, guys, right, we have looked at Async Await. We've gone over, well, not gone over, we have gone over promises and had a look at some promises code and seen how that effectively translates into an Async Await function. And I actually feel really ready to start work. I'm delighted I took this time to learn something, which is the whole point of the 100 days. You learn whatever you want, and you know, surely something that you want is going to be something that's going to make you feel more confident when you're doing your own coding. So, you know, pick what you would like to learn for your 100 days, and I hope that this was a helpful or insightful video of just going through this, because it certainly was helpful for me. So that's my whole aim, is to help you guys as well. That's what I want to do. So thanks so much for joining me, Lilly Code, on my channel for day 31 of 100 days of code. I don't know what day it is, who knows, I think it is day 31. And thanks a million. Have a lovely day and chat to you all tomorrow. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.